Wednesday or Thursday and said, I look forward to seeing you on Saturday night. And I just knew that he wasn't one of the two people that I thought I was speaking for on Saturday night. So I pretended to be driving. I had been driving recently, so it didn't seem like such a lie. And I said, would you mind sending me that flyer again? Because I didn't have the heart to say which Saturday night, because I knew that he thought I knew. Anyway, I'm glad to be here, and it all worked out. It's 3:00 in the morning. Who else would want me to speak? Anyway, I'll just start at the beginning. I'm an alcoholic and a member of the Mediterranean group. My name is Yisrael Campbell. The Mediterranean group meets here in Jerusalem, Israel, every Wednesday night. We also meet on Zoom. You're welcome to join us. Maybe Michael will put the information in the chat. We'd love to have you with us. Phil, before I get going too long, when do you want me to stop?
It would be 4:00 your time, so 9:00 here. So.
Okay. All right. Great.
See, I'm learning, man. I'm learning.
All right. Good. So listen, there's not much time, so I got to hurry up. First of all, I'm honored and privileged to speak in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in the great state of Tennessee. Some of my favorite people in the world live in Tennessee. I have never been to Tennessee, but I hope as soon as this thing ends and we can all travel again, it's amongst the first places I will go. My friend Michal Avraham is here. Maybe he's Michael Frank tonight. Maybe he's M.A. Zing. I'm glad that he's here with us tonight. He's a longtime sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous who buried a close friend of his on Friday because of alcoholism. And that's I hope he doesn't mind me saying that so bluntly. He said it early to me. I like to say, and Michal Avram likes to quote me as saying that I was sober when I started drinking. In fact, I started drinking because I was sober. I'll say that again because I really, really, really mean it. I was sober when I started drinking. In fact, I started drinking because I was sober. That's why I drank. I hated the way I felt as a sober human being. Okay? I was anxious. I was afraid. I was self-centered. I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't prove this to be true. But if fear, anxiety, self-obsession can be transferred through breast milk, I believe it was in my case. That is not to blame my mother in any way. My mother and I were clear and clean when she passed away on Christmas Eve 2009. My mother grew up Catholic. She was almost going to be a nun. She spent a year in the convent. I always say thank God she left. Otherwise, only half of me would be standing here today. I'm sitting actually, but that's the way I usually tell that little joke. The reason I bring it up is because she wanted to be a nun, I believe, because she had deep spiritual needs and desires. And she was deeply disappointed by the bureaucracy of the Catholic Church when she joined the convent, and she left in a fury. And she stayed furious for over 50 years. In 1999, when I was 19 years sober, I invited her and my father on a cruise that I was a sober vacation that I was asked to speak on in the Caribbean. And the night that I spoke, they'd never heard me speak in 19 years of sobriety. The meetings were in a bar before it opened every night. We had the meetings like 6:00 in the evening, and then the bar would open at 8. It was powerful to speak in a bar. I've done that before. We had a little clubhouse here, not a clubhouse, but we had a meeting space here in Jerusalem that was a bar. And on the top shelf, where the top shelf whiskey was, in the middle of the top shelf was a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I thought that was perfect. And I just read, and I've been sharing this. Nobody seems to be nearly as impressed as I was. When Bill Wilson moved into the Smith's house in the summer of 1935, after spending, he crashed at the Mayflower Hotel and the business went sour and he didn't have money to move out and somehow he got moved out. And I believe Henrietta Sieverling put him up or had a friend put him up in a country club somewhere for a couple of weeks. And then he moved in with the Smiths. And one of the first things he did was he bought 2 bottles of whiskey and he placed them prominently in the Smith's kitchen, which drove Ann Smith crazy because she knew what happened to her husband when he drank alcohol. But Bill was convinced that we can't hide from this. And I mean, I don't prominently display alcohol, but I don't hide from it either. I don't, and there's alcohol in this house right now. Anyway, I am so far off topic, it's not even funny. My mother in that ship's bar at the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting where her son, who was 19 years sober, had just spoken. When we stood and held hands to say the Lord's Prayer, she said, I'm not saying that goddamn prayer. I said, Mom, we are not in church. She was so furious. And I only bring that up because she suffered from clinical depression. And I believe at least a part, and I'm not a doctor, but I believe at least part of her depression was the spiritual angst, anxiety, and resentment she felt towards her unfulfilled spiritual needs. And I think that, I just to make it clear, I sit before you an Orthodox Jew living in Jerusalem, but I grew up an Irish Italian Catholic kid in Philadelphia. My mother, as I said, was going to be a nun, and I think it's very much a part of my DNA that I sought out something more than I was and different than I was, and something I could really hold on to, and that I could practice with a genuine sense of passion as a spiritual path. I know not all of us become religious. The book says most of us are religious. That isn't my experience. I don't see most people in AA as being religious, but some of us are, and don't hold that against us. I before I go any further, and I know I'm completely tangential at this point. I'm like 5 tangents away from where I started, but say 2 things to yourself. 1, it's 3:00 in the morning where he is. And 2, he's wearing a jacket and tie and a hat under his hat. He's got 2 hats on, a jacket and a tie, and he's sitting in his dining room screaming at his computer alone. So, and his sponsor who wants him to wear the tie is dead. So think about that. And he's drinking decaf because he wants to get some sleep tonight. Anyway, I'm completely gone. The 5th tangent was this. If you're new here tonight, and I don't know that we introduce newcomers, but if you're new here tonight, if you're in your first 30 days of sobriety, or as I heard someone recently say, in your last 30 days of sobriety, if you're in either one of those categories, please hear me when I say, I'm quoting the famous Hasidic rabbi Levi Yitzhak from Berdichev, the small town in Ukraine, which of course you all know. Levi Yitzhak said to the town atheist, the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. And if you're new here tonight, or about to leave here tonight, because we're a bunch of full of shit, bullshit artists, hear me when I say, that's not the God I'm talking about. The God I'm talking about is not the God that you don't believe in. I'm talking about something that I came to believe in here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm talking about the power that resides in the space between any 2 of us when one of us is trying to save their own life and the other is trying to share how they save their own life. And I mean that from the very first instant of hi, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous, to any difficulty that you encounter throughout Alcoholics Anonymous. My opinion, and I'll say this, if you're new tonight, everything I say is my opinion. My opinion is that for the individual member, there's no such thing as an outside issue. Now, I don't mean that so broadly that I want people to argue about politics or religion or whatever in a way that drives people out of Alcoholics Anonymous. But what I mean when I say there are no outside issues for the individual is that anything that I need to talk about in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I need to talk about. And if it affects my alcoholism, then it affects my alcoholism. And if it makes you uncomfortable, I'm sorry. I don't aim to share everything that I have to share in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why I have friends. That's why I have a sponsor. But if I need to, at any given moment, I'm saying to you, talk about what you need to talk about. And if they have a problem with that, say the old garden gnome from Jerusalem said it's okay. Okay? And send them my number. I put it in the chat. I'll talk to them. Because at any given moment, we need to say what we need to say in order to stay in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's precious few alcoholics that get to Alcoholics Anonymous. And a good number of those, I'm not up for the statistics. I'm not quoting the foreword or the preface or I didn't read the AA survey. I'm just saying this. In my experience, and I've been sober since the 14th of February, 1980, if I failed to mention that. I celebrated 41 years of continuous sobriety 2 weeks ago. Okay, in my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, and in life in the last 41 years, the vast majority of alcoholics never get to Alcoholics Anonymous. And a good many number of the alcoholics that do get here don't stay. So for those of us that are here, and for those of us who will be here tomorrow, who are finishing up tonight, who are out in the town of Kingsport, giving it one last go, and they'll be here tomorrow, hold on to them. Hold on to each other. Hold on to them. It's hard enough to get here. It's hard enough to stay. We happen to live in a tiny window where relief from alcoholism was available. Just because it's Noah, the guy with the boat, right? Now, I'm not giving you over religion. I'm simply giving you over a tremendously old cultural story. Somewhere between 3,500 and 5,000 years ago, God told Noah to build a boat. And you know what Noah did? He built a boat. And you know what he did after that? He saved the entire world. Not like, he didn't like have a nice weekend. He didn't make a big sale on Thursday. He saved the entire world. And you know what Noah did? When he got back from saving the entire world, the very first thing he did, he planted a vineyard and got drunk and naked in front of the kids. That's what he did. That's in the Bible. Now, you might say to me, that's not alcoholism. That's just problem drinking. Well, I don't know. I think that Noah might have had trouble controlling and enjoying his drinking. Don't you think? How do I know he's alcoholic? Because not only did he get drunk and naked in front of the kids, but he cursed the kids for what he did. He took zero responsibility for what he did, and he cursed the children. I used to say he blamed the children, but my Bible scholar friend Michal Avram says he cursed them, and I checked the text, and he cursed them. But what I'm saying is he took no responsibility. Clearly an alcoholic. From that day to this, somewhere between 3,500 and 5,000 years ago, until 1935, there was no effective relief for people that had the disease that we have. We live in a tiny window of human history when people didn't have to die from the disease we have. And even still, the vast majority of people will die of the disease that we have. It's a humiliating, shameful, disgusting death. Hold on to anyone that appears here. Hold on to anyone that gets here. I had my first drink when I was 9 years old. I say that I waited because I could have used a drink on the way to kindergarten. In fact, I could have used a drink on any single day of my entire life before I picked up a drink, because for me, alcohol was a solution. It was the answer to a problem. It's important for me to remember that, because by the time I stopped drinking 7 years later, alcohol had become a problem. And it seemed when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous that I was taking care of the problem, but what I was really deeply taking care of was the solution, right? That's what Dr. Young said to Bill Wilson in the letter, right? Bill Wilson wrote to Dr. Young in 1961, and he said, thank you, thank you, thank you. We should all write letters of thanks to whoever it is that we have to thank. We should say thank you. It's a wonderful thing to say thank you. And Bill Wilson took the time to write to Dr. Young and say thank you. What was he thanking him for? Dr. Young had worked extensively with Roland Hazard. Roland Hazard brought the message to Ebby. Ebby brought the message to Bill. I heard it said in a tape of Bill's that we count the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous to be June 10th, 1935, the day that Dr. Bob had his last drink. But Bill said it could have just as easily been 1933 when Roland helped Ebby or when Ebby helped Bill. Okay, it's a fluid continuum rather than a single solitary event. And what Dr. Young said about Roland, and I think it's true of all of us, he said his craving for alcohol was the equivalent on a low level of the spiritual thirst of our being for wholeness, expressed in medieval language, the union with God. What he was saying is that, and he said it plainly at the end of the letter, in case he got a little flighty there at the beginning, he said, you see, alcohol in Latin is spiritus, and you use the same word for the highest spiritual, religious experience, he wrote, as well as the most depraving poison. The helpful formula, therefore, is spiritus contra spiritum. Thinking of you in your kind letter, I remain yours sincerely, C.G. Young. I need to remember that alcohol was a solution for the causes and conditions that were underlying my need to drink, which was my alcoholism. And the reason I need to remember that is because when I get to Alcoholics Anonymous and I stop drinking, I may think I've taken care of the problem, and in many ways I have. But more than that, I've taken care of the solution. I don't have a solution anymore. I've stopped administering the solution, and I'll need another solution. And that solution is the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. That solution is all the stuff we do here, like going to meetings, like calling our sponsor, like having a home group, like having a commitment at that home group. I can give you a reason for each and every one of those things, and they all have to do with getting out of self. I haven't had a drink in 41 years. I only drank for 7 years. I was 16 when I got to AA. You know when I last encountered my alcoholism? Today. Recovered, I don't care. Not cured. That's what I want to remember. Not cured of alcoholism. That's what the book says to me. I once asked Clancy why Bill wrote recovered from alcoholism on the front page of the book if we still have alcoholism. He said he was trying to sell books. What do you think's going to sell more books, he said? Recovered from alcoholism? Or, well, you know, not drinking anymore, but sometimes subject to irrational fits of fear and rage. He was a book salesman that day and a stockbroker all the other days. And I don't know if you've met many stockbrokers, but my God, we're lucky. We got the most spiritual stockbroker I've ever met and a proctologist from Ohio. It's amazing that we got a program out of the two of them. But we did. I picked up my first drink when I was 9 years old. I drank for 7 years, start to finish. Had I known I was going to end up safe, sane, and sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have drank more. I would have done more. There's 1,000 people, probably 100 in this room, who have a much more graphic, horrible story than I do. I hang my alcoholism on the fact that the beginning of the 3rd chapter says the following. More about alcoholism. Three sentences in. The idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. I can control it or I can enjoy it. But I can't enjoy it if I'm controlling it, and I can't control it if I'm enjoying it. If I said that, you know what I mean. That's it. End of story. End of story. Two pages later, it will talk to me directly. It says, young people may be encouraged by this man's experience. This is the man who had some trouble with drinking, so he quit on his own for 25 years. And maybe in those 25 years, all the AA members would have said, see, he wasn't a real alcoholic. He was a heavy drinker. Given sufficient reason, he could stop drinking. And then he started drinking again 25 years later and was dead in 5. Who was right? Who was right? Someone has the opportunity to stop drinking through Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're going to push them away because we think they're a heavy drinker. Fuck you. That's what I say. Excuse me. I'm in Tennessee. Just wanted to make sure you were listening. Just wanted to make sure you were listening. I know I'm in the South now, and I'm a Yankee, and I used to just behave myself, or I'm going to be run out of town on a rail. That said, the guy stopped for 25 years, but was still an alcoholic. That's what the book is saying. Young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop, as he did, on their own willpower. We doubt if many of them can, because none of them will really want to stop. See, that's the thing we really have to want, is we have to want to stop. Something has to be greater. So we have to see a solution that is greater than the solution we've been using, as faulty as it is. And hardly one of them, because of the because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find that he can win out. The question is, how long do you want to try to win out? And I'm speaking to anyone who doesn't have the most horrible story in this room, which is 336 of us. In the early days, yes, they were the bottom of the bottom of the bottom. There's a story, and I think it's in AA Comes of Age, where they were working with a guy, and they said, oh, he's a great prospect. And then they realized he had a wristwatch. And who would stop drinking if they still had a wristwatch? That's not where Alcoholics Anonymous is today. People get here a lot earlier, a lot sooner, bumping along the bottom, but not crashing in the way that they did in 1935. And even they, read Bill's, Pass It On, and Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, like AA number 4 was a chronic relapser. AA number 5 was the 13th stepper. Like, they didn't, everyone makes it sound like they were just good old pure alcoholics, that Bill and Bob were doing drugs. Like, it's not crystal clear, and it never has been. Human beings are messy. So grab onto this. I want to say one more thing about alcohol. We used to buy a case of beer on Friday afternoon, throw it in the trunk, and I felt better. I didn't have a beer. I just had access to a beer. That's how powerful alcohol was for me. Once I knew I had access to it, it affected my behavior already. Not unlike, but more stretched out, because it took 5 or 6 or 7 hours before I'd have that beer. And I'd feel better the whole time. But not unlike when I sat down at a bar on the number of occasions that I did, not very many. As soon as I sat down, I put my cigarettes there, my lighter there, arranged the napkin there, my pile of cash there. I hadn't even ordered a drink yet, but I felt better. I felt better because I knew I had access to alcohol. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and you told me that we didn't drink. And when I asked, what do we do? My sponsor said to me, I'm addicted to escape. So I don't do anything that affects me from the neck up. I was not happy to find this out, because I didn't think I could live one single day without a drink or a drug or something to make me feel better, something to make me feel different, something outside of myself to change who and what I was. And I'll be honest with you, that's a hard idea to let go of. I don't drink. I don't take any chemicals that affect me from the neck up, with the exception of sugar, nicotine, and caffeine. I don't know why those 3 were exempted, but they were. It's not up for discussion. But I've grabbed a hold of a lot of behaviors along the way. I bought a lot of Amazon along the way. I watched a lot of porn along the way. I want to hold on to things. I think there's something outside of me. I think the right fountain pen. I think the right paper. I think the right ink. I think the right whatever it is that's not in me, the right synagogue, the right place to live, the right apartment where I live. Everything outside of me is going to fix me. And it's been a long, slow road to learn. And that doesn't mean I'm not sober 41 years. I'm sober 41 years. And I've had a lot of imperfection along the way, as we all have, because no one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. And I know we don't like to talk about it from the podium. And I know sometimes when you hear a speaker and you got a great speakers meeting here and you give the speaker some time, and I know sometimes it sounds like I got sober and I never had a negative emotion since, and everything's gone my way, and I've just been rewarded in every possible way. And I don't know why I'm speaking with a Southern accent, because I'm from Philadelphia. But you know what I mean? And maybe you're thinking, dude, that was not a Southern accent. But you know what I mean. Of course I want to share with you the fact that it was miraculous that I couldn't not drink. I couldn't not drink for a single day. And then I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and poof, that's what grace is. Poof, I could not drink. But staying here for 41 years has taken effort, focus, concentration, a ton of prayer, a ton of meditation, a ton of phone calls, a ton of reading that book, a ton of sitting in meetings thinking, God, am I going to be in one of these goddamn meetings for the rest of my life? You know, sometimes I forget that I come to Alcoholics Anonymous to give. That's the point of this step work. Yes, it's to have a spiritual experience as a result of these steps so that I can give this message to someone else. That's where it lives. Because when I forget that, when I come here to get, man, I'm disappointed. When I come to Alcoholics Anonymous to get, there's 1,000 better places to get spiritual experience. I can tell you 15 off the top of my head. But when I come here to give, first of all, I still get. And second, no better place in the world for me to give. Because I have something. And when I come to give, I remember I have something. And when I come to give, I see the guy that sits in front of me who has nothing, whose life is a wreck and they're about to die. Maybe literally, maybe figuratively. And I remember, oh yeah, you're not a guy who can't get a job. You're not a guy who can't get his car fixed. You're not a guy whose wife left. You're not a guy who this or that. You're not a guy who wanted to be this and became that. You're a guy that knows how to not pick up a drink one day at a time and knows how to build a life beyond their wildest dreams, knows how to walk with dignity and grace. Yes, makes the mistakes all over the place, but knows, has, and will again. And that's powerful stuff. That's powerful stuff. I don't know that many people that can have that at the drop of a hat. I don't know many people who can watch a miracle happen pretty much with Zoom any time of the day or night. I don't know many people whose lives are so constructed that they can find someone and help save their life right now and right now. That's why I want to be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I owe Alcoholics Anonymous for the life that I've been given, for the life that I've built. Say it any way you want. but it's beyond my wildest dreams. I promise you it's beyond my wildest dreams. If it were not beyond my wildest dreams, if it were but my wildest dreams, I would have had, and I would have asked for, if I had come to AA and they had said, Chris, stop drinking and you can have a life of your wildest dreams. You know what I would have? A lifetime supply of Marlboro and what would have been a brand new Camaro 41 years ago. I'd have cigarettes I don't smoke anymore and a 41-year-old car. And believe me, based on the way I take care of cars, it would not be a classic. But they didn't say you can have the life of your wildest dreams. They can say you can have a life beyond your wildest dreams. And what that means is that I couldn't see the life I was building until it happened, one day at a time, day by day, seemingly taking contrary action to getting what I didn't set out to be here. I wouldn't have known what to ask for. This is what happened as a result of going to a lot of meetings, sponsoring guys, being sponsored, having a home group, investing a lot of energy in a couple of activities. One, I went to drama school. Two, I went to yeshiva after I converted to Judaism. Definitely became less active in AA when those things were at full swing, but never once. I want to be clear. I've gone years without having a sponsor. I don't recommend it. I mean, I had one. I just never called them. That's what I say now. I have this new thing that I say. I got a bunch of guys. And if they call me, I'm going to say, none of them have called. I'm going to say, I am your sponsor, but I'm not sponsoring you. Because I don't want to fire anyone. I don't want to knock someone. I don't want to call them up and say, you know what? This isn't the way it works for me. That's not me. But I want them to understand that sponsorship, not because of who I am, but because of who we are together, is an action. It's a verb. It's a process. And if we're not in contact, it's not a process that's happening. Anyway, that's what that thing says to me on page 85, in the middle of the 10th step, when it says it is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We're headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. Right? We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Now, for years and years and years and years, if you had asked me to say that without reading it, I would have said, what we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on our spiritual condition. It says so much, just 2 lines above. It says, that's how we react as long as we are in fit spiritual condition. So it's not from nowhere that I got that idea. But down there below, it says contingent on the maintenance, not contingent on the spiritual condition. I can be in unfit spiritual condition, but be doing the maintenance. And that's all I'm responsible for. So go to your home group with a bad attitude. Call your sponsee back, even though you don't want to. It doesn't only work if you want it to work. It doesn't only work, I'm not going to call you, I don't feel pure enough in motive today. Well, you know what? It's not about you, Jack. How's that? I avoided one. It's not about you. It's about them. Yes, it would be nice if you could be kind and generous and compassionate when you speak to them and work for that. But the maintenance is the actions that we can take, not the result. And that's what I'm responsible for. I had something else really brilliant that I was going to say, but I don't remember what it was. Really quickly, I want to tell a story. I've been waiting all day to tell the story. It's a story about the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was the founder of Hasidic Judaism. The guys that look like me, but really serious guys. Guys that look like Michael used to look like. Anyway, the Baal Shem Tov came along in the mid to late 1700s, and Judaism had ossified. It had gotten rigid. gotten stuck in legalities and rules. I'm not saying that's what's happening to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm really not. And the Baal Shem Tov came along and said, we have to laugh, and we have to dance, and we have to sing. We have to have joy. We have to always have joy. And when he was dying, he gathered all his followers around. He gave them each a job. Big guys got the big job. Phil got a big job. Michael got a big job. Arnie got a big job. Sue from Nashville got a big job. Joanne, big job. The little guys like Jill and I, we got the little jobs. And one little chassid loved the Baal Shem Tov. He kept not getting called in for a job. And finally, he was called in, and the Baal Shem Tov said, your job is to go throughout Europe and tell the stories of our life and our work together. And this guy must have been in AA, because the very first thing he said was, for how long? Right? Isn't that you watch from now on, anytime someone gets a job in AA, the very first question they ask is, for how long? They haven't even started, and they already want to know when they can stop. Is this a 6-month commitment or a year commitment? I don't have anything on my schedule, but I might be busy by then. Right? We just want to stop, and we haven't even started yet. So the Baal Shem Tov says, you'll know when to stop. And when the Baal Shem Tov died and everything was done there, he went out, and for years he crisscrossed Europe telling the stories of the life and the work of the Baal Shem Tov. He was the storyteller of the Baal Shem Tov. And one day he woke up and he thought, I'm done. I just feel done. And then he heard there was an Italian nobleman who was paying gold coins to hear new stories of the Baal Shem Tov. And he thought, maybe I'm not done. And he made his way to the nobleman's castle. And the whole way there, he's thinking, God, I'm going to make so much money. I am the storyteller. That's all I do is tell stories. I know so many stories. Gold coin for every story. And he was dancing, and he was singing, and he was bip-ba-dap-ba-bapping. And he got there, and the nobleman brought him in, and he sat him right in front of him, and he was glad to see him. The nobleman seemed so happy to see the storyteller. And the storyteller opened his mouth, and he couldn't think of a single story, not one. He sat there the whole day, couldn't think of a single story. The nobleman said, look, get some rest, eat, shower, play tennis, late 1700s, whatever. Nothing. Next day, nothing. 2 full days, couldn't think of a single story. On the 3rd day, finally, in the middle of the day, he got up and said, I have to leave. I am the story of the Baal Shem Tov, the storyteller of the Baal Shem Tov. This is all I do. I can't think of a single story. I'm humiliated. I'm disgraced. I'm leaving. And the nobleman didn't want him to go, but he let him go, and he's making his way down the hill, down the path into the village, when he thinks of one story. Seemingly inconsequential, seemingly insignificant. He goes back and he's brought right in. The nobleman's again glad to see him. He says, I don't know why I'm telling you this story. It's insignificant. It's inconsequential. But I want to prove to you who I am. I am who I say I am. I'm not going to take your money. Don't worry. And he tells the following story. He says, one spring season, the Baal Shem Tov told me to get the horses ready. We were going to Turkey. Now, Turkey in the spring was not a good place. It was Easter. They sacrificed the Jews sometimes for reparations. They hated me, get angry at the Jews. And he said, I don't think we should go. And the Baal Shem Tov said, get the horses ready. We're going to Turkey. And the whole way there, he thought, okay, as soon as we get there, we'll lay low. Surely the Jews are hiding. And in fact, they were. And the Baal Shem Tov threw open the shutters to the building they were hiding in, looked down on the town square just as the Christian procession was entering the square. And he said to the little husk, go get the bishop. The bishop, the guy with the hat and the stick? I don't think I should get the bishop. He said, get the bishop. The bishop doesn't look very happy. He said, bishops rarely look very happy. He said, get the bishop. And I made my way down, and I got through the crowd, and nobody said anything. Nobody yelled at me. Nobody hit me. And I made it to the bishop, and I said, the Baal Shem Tov wants to speak to you. He said, after the Mass, I'll come and I'll speak to him. And he did. They went into a back room for 3 hours, and the Baal Shem Tov came out and said, get the horses ready. We're going home. And I said, the horses are already ready. And we made our way back. And that was the end of the story. And before the little chassid could look up one more time and apologize to the nobleman for telling an inconsequential, insignificant story, the nobleman stopped. And the chassid looked up, and the nobleman was crying. His whole attitude and outlook on life had changed. And before the chassid could say a word, the nobleman said, I was that bishop. I came from a long line of rabbis, and I was so afraid of the persecution of our people that I converted to Christianity. And after some time, I went along with the killing of our own people and the persecution of our own people. And after some time, the Christians were so happy they made me their bishop. And I went along year after year. And when the Baal Shem Tov came and said if he wanted to speak to me, I knew I had to speak to him. And I asked him if I could ever be forgiven and if I could ever be healed. And he said, go live a life of quiet, good deeds. And if ever anyone comes and tells your story, then you'll know you've been forgiven and you've been healed. And 3 days ago, you came here and you couldn't tell my story. And today, you told my story. I recognized you immediately, but you couldn't see me. And today, you told my story. And today, I know I've been forgiven and I've been healed. And I say to you here tonight that it's here in Alcoholics Anonymous more than anywhere else in the world that I hear my story told. And every time I hear my story told, I know that I've been forgiven and I've been healed. But listen, please listen just for one more moment. I don't hear my story told when I'm speaking. I hear my story told when you're speaking. So it doesn't matter if I'm here. I need you to be here. And I need you to raise your hand. And I need you to tell your story. Because only when you tell your story do I hear my story. And only when I hear my story do I know that I've been forgiven and I've been healed. That's what happened in Akron that day. Bill Wilson went to Dr. Bob, went to Henrietta Sieberling's. Henrietta invited Dr. Bob. You know the story, but I'll say it one more time. On their way there, and I heard this from Dr. Bob's son, who was in the back of that car. Now I read that he was driving the car. I don't know. He was in the car. And his father, Dr. Bob Smith, our co-founder, turned to his mother, Ann Smith, and said, we'll give this bird 15 minutes. Because the last thing Dr. Bob needed when he was hungover on Mother's Day, 1935, was another person to tell him, Bob, you shouldn't drink. Bob, you're a surgeon. Bob, you're a Christian. Bob, you're an Ohioan. Bob, you're from Vermont. Bob didn't need to be told he didn't need to drink. He knew he didn't need to drink. He knew he shouldn't drink. He just didn't know how not to drink. And Bill Wilson sat there. And Bill Wilson didn't talk to Bob Smith about Bob Smith. Bill Wilson talked to Bob Smith about Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson told Bob Bill's story. But Bob heard Bob's story. And he stayed for 6 hours. That's the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the miracle we're given, the opportunity we're given each and every day to share our life so that someone else can hear their life and save their life. Thank you.